Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's SeritiTALKS. It's so lovely to have everyone on board, and we're looking forward to a very informative conversation. Hi, Ayanda. Nicola and Michelle, can I please ask that you switch on your camera?
Hi, I think you'll just need to switch it on for us.
Oh, okay.
Me as well.
Sandy's working there on that for us. I see that we have a number of attendees on board, so I think that we'll just jump right into it. And how we're going to go about this would be initially to just introduce the speakers, and I will start with Nicola. Nicola has a BA Honours in Critical Discourse Analysis from the University of Witwatersrand. She has a PDM Public and Development Management from Wits School of Governance. Nicola is also an experienced social researcher and entrepreneur who values the use of data systems and thinking to drive sustainable, meaningful change. She's focused on addressing some of the world's most pressing problems, through community-centric and cooperative methodologies, integrating innovation with participation. Nicola's experience in grassroots organization, activism, and stakeholder engagement has led her to co-found FEED, a project that brings together her passion for people and the planet through the lens of food. Having previously established Pleasure in Africa and has been involved in global social projects over the past 10 years, Nicola currently holds professional association with the US SDS and Youth Local, Pathways Fellowship, Lucha Lunaco, Simanye, LGIU, GYCC, and Sustainability Institute. Nicola, welcome to today's discussion, and thank you so much for making the time for us.
Thank you so much, Refilwe. Thank you for having me today.
Is there anything that you would like to add on to what I've just read, if perhaps we missed something?
I feel like that was quite a comprehensive biography.
Thank you so much. And in a moment, I'll be going through to Ayanda's profile. Ayanda Vana is a Chief Operating Officer from Kula App. And she has, sorry about that. Ayanda Vana is a Chief Operating Officer at Kula App, a tech startup which is a fast-growing B2B e-commerce marketplace for farmers in Africa, and she heads up the Kula. The Kula Funder Dashboard. Ayanda attained her Bachelor of Social Science and LLB from the Rhodes University. Thereafter, she completed articles in law firm. She is currently reading for her Master's in Law in the University of Witwatersrand. Ayanda, thank you so much for making the time for us. Is there anything that we missed from your bio?
No, I think that's perfect. Thanks, Refilwe.
All right, and then we'll be moving on to Michelle. Michelle Kanjere is a data analyst with a passion for research in technology and innovation space. Michelle has previously worked as a data insight manager at Africa's first ed tech incubator, Ingenie, where she combined her passions for data, innovation, education, and technology. At Ingenie, Michelle coordinated incubator-related projects and compiled research projects to support education technology initiatives in Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Zambia, and South Africa. Michelle has recently joined the Footprint team as the operations lead, and she's excited about the potential this solution has to make a difference regionally and across the continent in an underrepresented population. Prior to joining industry, Michelle conducted academic research in microbiology at the University of Cape Town, a core competence of which involved data analysis. She holds a BSc Honours and an MSc Med in medical microbiology from the University of Cape Town. Ayanda, thank you so much for joining us and making the time today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Ayanda, are you there?
I am here, but I think you're
Sorry, that was
referring to.
Michelle. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this talk.
All right. Well, the first question would be, right? What do we believe the role of women in agriculture and development is? And Nicola, this one is for you.
Thank you for that. So I think that the role of women in agriculture and food systems more broadly really spans centuries. It's nothing new. Women have been very, very involved in food from the perspective of growing it, procuring it, preparing it, from many decades and centuries past. I feel like in the modern world where, a lot of that still applies, but additionally, there's now space for women to have more of a say in how this happens. So it's a slight shift in power dynamic. And I feel that the time is ripe, certainly now, and with the advent of technology, but also with talk about equality and equity and so forth, that women can begin to redefine or slightly redefine what the food system means to them.
All right, thank you for that. And it is key, the important role that we've always played in this space of just food provision. And quickly, Michelle, what do you think then this agricultural space would look like if women were to take leadership roles in agriculture?
Thank you, Refilwe. There's a saying in education that says, if you educate a girl child, you've educated a generation, or you've educated a family. So that effect of just educating one individual will span for much longer than that, or much wider than that. So I think the role that women play in the agricultural industry is the same. So if you provide them with opportunities to be in leadership and to drive change and to drive innovation, the effects will be much wider than just for a particular region or just a particular country. It'll go into all sectors. So I think it's very important for women especially to be involved in leadership roles, not just in agriculture, because I'm a strong feminist, but in all aspects of society, as they can bring about a change that, not that men can't, but a significant change that only a woman can, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And Ayanda, then moving on to the tech and technology and what it is, what role it is that it plays in agriculture. Could you please briefly give us an overview of this?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about tech in agriculture, I know people always have this conception that, tech is new in agriculture, but that's quite a flawed concept because tech has been played such a huge role in agriculture. I think we need to change that narrative and saying, what role does it play? What has it played? What are they meeting now? They've already met. And, when you look at how technology has been driving so much innovation in agriculture for many years, you look at what commercial farmers are doing, the production that they're running on their farms, you see the immense technology. I mean, when you think about how we've had to come up with innovation and how to feed at large scales, I mean, that for me also shows you the amount of technology that play in agriculture. However, I do want to say that now the new type of technology that we're experiencing, and also part of what Kula is doing and a lot of other companies, that there's a new shifting of technology. Now the tech today is focusing on, or the new type of technology, it's focusing on the needs for access. And I think also that touches on what we do at Kula in terms of, touching on access, transparency. People want to know the supply chain. People want to understand and follow that journey on transparency. And obviously another important thing, efficiencies. A lot of what's happening right now, the role of technology in today's day and age, it most speaks to sort of the supply chain chain versus, for instance, what's been happening in many, many years, where it was, and essentially it was the leader and driving some of the innovation that was happening. We cannot even, I think when we visit commercial farmers, you're always blown away at the amount of tech plays in those roles. But however, I think there is a new way of fast merging way of how our technology is doing to I would say what's been happening the last couple of years, a lot of the tech that's moving in, it's speaking to the supply chain. It's speaking to how can we bring more efficiencies? How can we provide more access for farmers? How can everyone have market fair share, where it's not one type of farmer saturating the whole market and everyone else is sort of scrambling for bits of part of the pie, because 90% of that pie is taken by a certain group of one type of farmers. So now it's more like, let's make more market share. And I think a lot of technology is playing a lot of role, where we see a lot of apps developing because of that, to provide those efficiencies, to provide that market access, to provide that market share amongst all the different farmers.
Well, that is a mouthful, and I have so many follow-up questions for that. But maybe I should direct the next question to Nicola. And Nicola, perhaps just give us a brief overview of what the feed program entailed, and how did you come up with it? The Nicola feed initiative.
Right. So the prize really was inspired by a number of different things. One of them being a prize process that we ourselves went through at an international level. And we were just really wowed with the kind of innovation that the prize encouraged. People who previously had never thought about working together from vastly different sectors came together in these multidisciplinary teams. And it was so inspiring to see. Although a very small pool, ended up making it through to the very, very end of the competition, many of those teams ended up sticking together, and new products or businesses or innovations were born out of that. So that was a huge point of inspiration for us. But then also in South Africa, which, is still part of the global community, we have a very interesting and very complex food system in this country. One that over time, it didn't always used to be this way, but over time has become quite monolithic and one-dimensional. Although you would think so at first glance, but under the surface, there's a lot happening. There are very interesting projects going on, people who don't know about each other, things that really have just been flying under the radar, and of course, an excess of ideas. So we decided that the model that had been used for the previous the competition that we were involved in ourselves, really with some adaptations, of course, could work in South Africa. We decided that the focus really should be on not just food generally, but specifically the intersection of food and tech as an enabler of change in the food system. And we've had the most amazing response. We're very lucky to be on a panel here with Michelle from Foodprint, a deserving winner of our inaugural prize, but also so many other competitors really that came forward with their ideas and their stories, both new and existing, that showed us there's a lot of diversity in our food system. We need to embrace it, we need to platform it, and we need to enable it. So that was the thinking behind the prize, and as far as it goes for our first year, this has been our first time running the prize. We've had an amazing response, and we really feel, inspired and motivated for years to come.
Awesome, that sounds great. And maybe Michelle, you could tell us how you came up with this great innovation that ended up catching the panelists' attention and you winning the prize.
Thank you, Refilwe, and thanks, Nicola, again for the vote of confidence. Foodprint actually came out of an ideation session of the Masters in FinTech class at UCT. And the whole idea in this class was to explore use cases for blockchain in Africa. And obviously, if you think blockchain, 90% of those are around cryptocurrencies and financial applications, and only a small component of that was non-financial. And one of the ideas being Foodprint, which was a way of using blockchain technology to bring about transparency and traceability to food supply chains that smallholder farmers participate in. And the reason we targeted smallholder farmers was because they're often overlooked by innovation, by capitalist systems, because their high risk or return on investment is not very high. And another thing we wanted to focus on them for is because they're often not paid fairly and have limited access to markets and consumers. So the idea was to use blockchain to show food supply chains and also have a social impact that's strongly attached to the solution. I hope you can hear me. There's a lot of background noise on my side.
All right, we got you.
Cool. And then, so what we did with our pilot is we worked with a farm market called Orangezet that is in Cape Town at the waterfront. And we had a weekend market where we're able to have access to farmers, access to the market organizers, and access to consumers who used to come buy produce on the weekends. And for this pilot, we set it up to observe and see where the learnings could be made, where inefficiencies were present, but also to engage with all the key players in that to see how we can bring about change. So we put a prototype, and the key learnings from this were that, for starters, farmers don't want things that complicate their lives. So telling them to now log an additional process on a computer or a web app was just not going to work. And secondly, at least in the current market in South Africa, no one is going to pay extra for blockchain traceability. There wasn't that immediate value add. But what it revealed was, which a bit of a light bulb moment for us, was that farmers struggle with operations management. So if you tell a smallholder farmer to produce records for 2 years, they would struggle because some of it is in Excel, some of it is in text messages, some of it probably in emails. And from speaking to a lot of farmers, not just at this market, but outside at different areas, so in Gauteng and Stellenbosch, through a couple of other organizations we worked with, we're able to come up with the idea to then pivot into digitizing their data, and which would allow them to have access to further markets and further services. So currently we're working on translating that web app to a WhatsApp component with a chatbot that would help smallholder farmers have data that is credible, and this will allow them access to markets, access to services, and in the future, access to financial services, which will help them be more sustainable and be more successful overall. That was a mouthful.
That's great. Yes, and it sounds like it was an exciting journey for you. And perhaps, Ayanda, just to rope you in here, do you find that farmers are actually using these apps, or perhaps what kind of farmers do you find that more receptive of new technology?
Yeah, so I think, it's a very, there's different parts to this because, Kula has evolved in the last 4 years. We've started 4 years ago when one of the co-founders went to Israel and he was blown away by the innovation agriculture. And then we came back to say, how can we implement that in South Africa and with South Africa and obviously expand to other countries? And, I think as Michelle was speaking, I think the journey was very similar, spending time at the Johannesburg market, understanding the supply chain, understanding the inefficiencies, understanding the pain points. And what you'll find that with a lot of these farmers, a lot of farmers that have these massive pain points is, your smallholder to emerging farmer, right? And that's how we initially started. Our focus was like, how can we bring efficiencies? How can we speak to the pain points where you have a farmer who will sell probably a bunch of spinach for 8 Rand to an agent at this China market, well, not to an agent, but it will be sold on behalf of by the agent at the Johannesburg market. Then the farmer, you as the consumer, the end product, you're going to buy for 32 Rand. Meanwhile, the farmer got 8 Rand. And then you have even that 8 rand, the farmer still has to pay the agent fee and still has to pay the municipality, and that's 14% gone. And then there's logistics, which is another 30% of the entire equation. So the farmer misses out a lot in that whole thing in terms of when you follow the supply chain, and saying, why not then bring the farmer and buy it onto one platform? And that's why we firstly started. And so obviously when we started, there was a whole lot of sort of interest from emerging farmers, because that was the biggest issue that emerging farmers experienced more than commercial farmers. So the usage of the app was a lot of emerging farmers. And obviously, as we started growing and we started bringing on more partners onto the platform, we obviously started exploring other relationships. We started exploring, what does that look like to have more market access opportunities? What are buyers looking for, you know? And it's very hard to reinvent the wheel of what the industry wants. If the industry wants global gap certification, unfortunately, that's something that you have to also consider. Then obviously then there was such a shift of not only looking at emerging farmers to then also looking at commercial farmers, right? And so now when we look at that part, and then we have the inputs app where we have over 100 suppliers on our inputs app. It's basically like a take a lot for farmers. If you're looking for seedlings, seeds, fertilizers, chemicals, you can go buy there. And we have onboarded already existing suppliers. So your AECI, your Bayer, your Sakata, any suppliers that farmers use, they can essentially use the inputs app to do that. And we've had to rope in some really suppliers that farmers rely on. Then when you move into that space, then you have farmers that are all types of farmers that are using it, because commercial farmers could use it, but the adoption at this stage has been mainly emerging farmers, because what you've seen in the past is that emerging farmers will have to travel 10 kilometers to buy seeds, another 20 kilometers to buy fertilizers, another 30 kilometers to buy chemicals. And so, why not consolidate that and bring it to one platform? And also, it's so always mind-blowing too when you speak to the farmers, and how for them, when they see prices, they're blown away, because it's such one of those industries that you get a price upon when you ask for a quotation. Then you have to shop around for different quotations, because you're like, this is too high, this is too high. But then the minute you see it on an app, you're like, wow, actually, it was such a shock to them to be like, I'm seeing it beforehand before I even request the quote. You know what I mean? So, things like that. And having to place pricing at a very similar, even what you find in the inputs app, when farmers are buying inputs like chemicals or fertilizers, commercial farmers will always buy probably get a 30% discount or cheaper than what an emerging farmer buys, because of obviously they buy in bulk. But now what we've done is there's such a competitive edge, because we've sort of leveled that playing field for an emerging farmer. But what I'm trying to get to is that it really depends on the platform that you use, where the adoption is. Are they using it? Yes. If there's a need, yes, they are using it. There's a need for market access. There's a need for inputs. I'm looking for inputs. I'm looking for services. Kula has 190 crop advisors because of AECI. Now I can rely on this crop advisor, even when I'm in Toyando or the most remote areas. I don't need to call the next person to come to my farm. I can just do that on the platform. And so when there is a need, they are using them. And even the third leg being a funder dashboard, which is what I head up, where farmers are looking for. We work with funders to better support and better fund farmers. And again, there's a need there and there's a usage. But I think a lot of the adoption to all these platforms, it really goes back to need. But I think also what the danger is that it only segments one part of one section of farmers, but it's actually for everyone. We work with every type of farmer, but right now the need is for a lot of them is for emerging farmers. But our business model has been built to such a point that a smallholder farmer, a commercial farmer, an emerging farmer can purchase on the inputs app. They're not limited by sort of what type of, how big their business size is. If you want to buy, you can buy. If you want to sell, well, with certain requirements, then you can also sell your produce. So I think that's my answer. I'm trying to also build context around it.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. It sounds very user-friendly, even like a thing that any other person would be able to use, and hopefully farmers are utilizing this important tool. Nicola, just a quick one on the accessibility of the tech industry within the agricultural space. Do you think women or young girls are exposed to this specific aspect of agriculture?
I think it's quite difficult in a country like South Africa, which has very sort of traditional gendered structures in families, within communities, and so forth. We're not yet where we need to be with access. But if we think about how to improve this, for example, by using tools that are regularly used, e.g. WhatsApp, or low data, or via fora and platforms where women are already congregating, I think we'll start to see that shift. There's a significant argument to be made for example, Facebook, which has a free version. The majority of people in South Africa actually are using the free version of Facebook. How can something like that be leveraged for access purposes? So we both need to think, broadly, but also quite specifically, what is inhibiting access?
So it would primarily just go back to it being a matter of, can I afford the information to start with? Do I even know that this space exists for me to start looking for that information in that space? It's very interesting because of the developments over the years, and we are still at a point where people are not really much aware of what is going on in that space. And maybe just to rope you in there, Michelle, what do you think then in terms of the global space in technology and agriculture? What do you think South Africa is faring like?
Sorry, can you say that again, Refilwe?
In terms of gauging South Africa's performance or South Africa's response to the need of technology in agriculture across the entire world, where do you think we are? Are we at least now trying? Are we really out there, doing it? Or are we just at the initial stages?
I am probably a little bit biased, and anyone else on the panel can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we're barely scratching the surface with a lot of these technologies, and Ayanda and Nicola have all spoken. I think we're on the right track, definitely, in terms of providing this access, providing this information, and making the processes easier for people in agriculture, men or women. But I think in terms of a global perspective, we're barely scratching the surface. We definitely have room to take over because of how much strength we have as a continent to be able to take strides in the agriculture space. We have so much space and so much agriculture happens on the continent. So I think we definitely have the resources to be able to take lead in that area. But there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess it's great that yourselves and Ayanda from Kula, you already, have been there. And maybe it's for us in this space to echo out the message and make sure that we just more or less always saying the same thing, so that people are aware that there is space for development in this area, and there is actually potential for not only growth but profit margins to be made. And now my next question would be that where would one find this material? Where would one find this information? Maybe Ayanda, if you could help there. If I wanted to find out what's going on with tech in the agricultural space, and I'm just maybe a teenager, or I just have an interest in agriculture, and at the time I'm maybe 20, 24, what are the spaces that I should potentially look out for?
All right. I think also just to add to Michelle, I think another thing about where we at, I think we are part of the conversation when we look at innovation that's happening, especially when it comes to the new tech that's developing, that's linked to the supply chain. You looked at Hello Tractor, you look at aerobotatics. When you look at all these different sort of companies that are now fastly growing, you can see that we are part of the conversation. But obviously, because we have 2/3 of the most arable land, we should be driving that innovation, because ultimately we hold the most arable land in the world. And they predict that Africa is going to be a $1 trillion market by 2030, but yet we're still importing $40 billion worth of food. So, it really is, some of those stats just don't make sense, and we should be really driving that. But that the answer is, like Michelle said, it's a very tough one because of all that's happening. But what we do also need is funders to fund these innovation things. None of this is possible without people funding these innovative ideas by entrepreneurs or some startups. That only way we really be in a position where we are competing, not even competing, I don't want to use the word competing, but when we get to see ourselves in a position where we are producing these innovative ideas, it's funding. We need more funders to fund these ideas. And I think that's something that's a huge struggle in South Africa, funding startups, funding ideas and all of those things. So just to add to that, if there are any funders, fund more for entrepreneurs on this panel. I don't know if there are any. So I think just where can you get these resources? I mean, really depends. Hey, so if you're a farmer, I always say that associations are really important. So, joining commodity-based associations. So if you are a citrus farmer, the CGA is probably the best place to join an association because they speak to your citrus, sort of anything that's linked to citrus related matters. So you want to join something like that because every information that they do share with you will be tailored to citrus. They are an association. You meet other farmers from there. So I think for me, that's always the best point of call to say, find associations within the commodity or whatever you're doing, whether it be sugarcane. Find those associations because those are the right sort of avenues. You're already they're already targeting sort of the kind of information you're looking for. And I mean, I think there's generic things, a very broad question, but obviously you have universities, you can do research there. You can look at media outlets such as Farmers Weekly. They have really great resources. They're always touching on the latest tech, innovative stuff in agriculture, agri-tech, sort of news, social media platform, and I think also national market websites. So if you look at national market websites, you will also find some of those things. But it's really, I think, subjective of what kind of resources you have at hand. And obviously this is with the assumption that you have internet and you can research, and it might not be like that for everyone. So I think that it's a very broad question, also based on what you're trying to accomplish from finding all this information.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that, Ayanda. And I needed to check now with Nicola. Has the pandemic somehow affected the agricultural sector, and how has technology sort of alleviated the burden that this has come with?
Absolutely, it has been affected in many different ways. Given that food is such a physical, tangible thing, of course, being unable to gather in large groups and things like that has been significant. People getting sick, unable to work as much, things like that. But I think it's also, it's facilitated some understandings that perhaps we didn't have before. It's showed us that our current food system is really quite centralized, which is dangerous from a resilience perspective. If something happens, if disaster hits, such as a pandemic, then if you're reliant on certain supply chains only and something happens to those chains, well, then you're in trouble. Then it could impact food security. So I think it's shown us that we need a lot more diversification in the food system. We need to enable that where it's happening, and technology can play that role. Without the panelists here, market access for especially small scale farmers is a significant barrier. We should never underestimate that for many reasons, many systemic reasons. So that's part of one piece of the puzzle. But other things are, perhaps others would like to join the food supply chain. I've got some land, I've got time, I need to earn an income. How can I do this? What are the resources that are available for me to learn? Online tools can be excellent for that, again. So I think we're expanding our definitions and our views of how technology can help us within the food system. There's no kind of one solution. There's a lot happening in the space. And of course, because it's a very innovative space, it's constantly changing. But I think that we now realize that the possibilities are almost endless if we do this properly with tech.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that. And Michelle, perhaps if you could tell us what is it that you feel like Footprint is doing in this space to close these critical gaps.
Yeah, thanks, Refilwe. I think at Footprint, as I mentioned before, we want to enable farmers to give them the best foot forward, right? So to put them in those spaces where they can, at the, I guess, bare minimum, sell their produce. But outside of putting them in spaces where they can sell their produce and get the most money out of that, we want to enable them to get access to other services that they already don't have much access to. So access to, I guess with Footprint, so I'll speak through a couple of different things that we mainly focus on. So there's the marketplace, which is consumers like you and I can buy a subscription, and weekly or say bi-monthly, we can get a box of fresh vegetables from different smallholder farmers. And you can also sort of see that track record of where that vegetable is grown from, who's the farmer attached to that. And then the second aspect would be retail. And this is putting the smallholder farmers in connection with markets, in connection with supermarkets, and helping them sell at scale and to be able to reap more benefits from that. And as Ayanda was saying, a smallholder farmer might sell to an intermediary a bundle of spinach for 8 Rand, but I, as the consumer, buy that for 32 Rand. And like in between, there's a lot of money that is lost, and the smallholder farmer gets the bare minimum, but they've done most of the work. And then the last aspect is we want to enable smallholder farmers to be more successful. So getting them access to financial services through a form of credit scoring that we can use with the application of blockchain with Footprint, I think will be able to set them up quite well, at least different to what is currently going on at the moment.
Awesome, thank you for that. And Ayanda, we have a question for you on the Q&A, and it's primarily just asking if you think that the government is doing enough to support initiatives around, or the government or the private sector in supporting initiatives around technology and its activity around in the agricultural space. And the example is here, Capital to start Kula app. Anyone can do it with limited resources, or does it require massive cash injection to make it happen? So yes, I guess that's what the question is. Do we need like a lot of money to get started, or is it just the bare minimum will do, and is government or the private sector supporting in this space?
Yeah, such a good question. I think that goes back to our startup space in terms of funding. It really goes, it's in South Africa, I think it's hard to get funding when your idea has not been implemented, right? To get someone to find a seed idea to say, hey, I don't have a product market fit just yet, but please fund me to find that product market fit. It's not always an easy thing, but there are funding opportunities that are out there. But with any tech space, and I think even Michelle can speak to this, starting a tech platform is expensive. And it's a lot of work. And you quickly realize how much you need to raise to make sure that that happens. When we first started at Kula, the first 2 years was bootstrapping, entering competition. So another thing, enter competition. You know, if you have a cool idea, enter those competitions. We won the MTN App of the Year. We won a bit of money in 2018. We won the Shivasa Award. We won a bit of money, you know, so enter those competitions, because those competitions obviously also help with sort of funding while you're still trying to test your idea, and before you go to an investor, before you go to an institution to say, hey, this is what I think we need in the market, but I need money to see if there's a product market fit for my seed around, right? And so once you start doing those competitions really do help in helping you build. And unfortunately, with the tech space, funding is a big thing. It's such an expensive exercise in terms of, obviously you'll need software engineers. If you're a software dev, that's awesome because you've already sort of done that part. But having to do that, we just recently raised our seed round. We closed it last year, but we announced it this year on TechCrunch. And just getting that sort of seed round so that we're able to test our product for our seed was also a journey. But I think when you are solving a problem, that when you're solving a solution that really is speaking back to a problem, when you find the right investor, they will invest. But it's important to really take yourself through that journey of finding the right investor, finding the right funders. And is government doing enough? I think there are opportunities, but they're not accessible. So people don't know where to go. People don't know how to partner with corporates. Corporates also have cool ways to partner with startups. They can partner through the ESD department. It doesn't even have to be funding. They can pay for salaries. People don't know that those things are available, right? And so I think they need to be more visibility in terms of how they can help people looking for funding for their ideas. And if your solution is solving a very sort of a pain point in society, it shouldn't be an issue in really trying to find the funders, but I think making sure that you have access to those funders, that's where the gap is. But I really do think that the government or corporates should be doing more to be out there to say, this is how I want to partner with startups or partner with people that are coming up with ideas. But I also don't want to discourage you from saying that because of that lack, therefore don't. There are other ways on how you can make it work, in terms of competition, how you enter competition, use that money to start building, then enter another competition. If you win, use that money. And then once you have a product that you can take to sort of an investor or a funder, then you're able to then sell that. But I think we need to be doing more to put ourselves out there, or not even us, corporates and governments needs to put themselves out there and be strategic about it. I can go on about funding because it's been a journey for us. I can talk about VCs and how, but anyway, I'm just saying that they are out there. Just find ways to be strategic about it. But one thing to remember that technology, unfortunately, building a product is expensive. And yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's important for you to find a way to get started, and it could be through those partnering with smaller other organizations, joining competitions and such. But the important thing is for you to get started. So by the time you get to investing or looking for donors and funders, you already have a product that you can stand for. Is there anything that you would want to add to that, Nicola?
Yes, I think I want to say that and Michelle, Ayanda did touch on it. You don't always need to go out there and build an app. That's not always the solution. Sometimes it is. But increased visibility of what people are already doing, via mechanisms such as the Angola Feed Innovation Prize and others, can lead to collaboration. And that's kind of what we want to see. Are there ways for, maybe there's an offshoot of a particular product or something new we can do with it? How can we work as a collective with our collective knowledge and understanding and resources and skills to develop things that really have been very well considered from multiple perspectives and that are highly impactful in the field? So I just wanted to say that it's not always about raising lots of money and developing something yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for that. And Michelle, would you like to add something to this conversation when it comes to funding? How are we finding that the government and the private sector is responding to this need? If I'm a startup and maybe I have exposure to collaborations or maybe I don't, how do I then get my product to just get the start up and move it forward?
I think they've spoken about the most important points. But just to echo what Ayanda said, there's definitely more that government and corporates could be doing. I know the very fact that it's a startup is quite high risk, and usually people are wary of that. They're afraid of that failure. But if you look on the other side, they could be massive success. So a lot more organizations should be taking a chance with these ideas that startups have.
All right, thank you for that. Ayanda, do you find that there are other challenges that the agri-e-commerce comes with?
Sorry, I was muted. I think, especially in agriculture, so you're walking into a very traditional space, right? You're walking into a space where you look at the Johannesburg market. I mean, we always say it's like Wall Street in 1928. You know, you ask yourself, how is this still operating like this? You know, it's like almost 100 years behind or something. So like, maybe not 100 being dramatic, but it is sort of very outdated. So you walk into an industry that is very traditional. I mean, I love when we visit our farmers and we like, whether it's smallholder or commercial farmer with that 1,000-hectare farm. And it's almost like, you know, teaching sort of how to use the app, because obviously in agriculture, traditionally, you also have, you know, third generation farmers who are probably much older. So technology is a new concept. And I think a lot of how we've built our product is based on the feedback we get. Maybe someone saying this square is too small, you know, at this time, I'm maybe I'm this age. I don't want to be trying to navigate that. So that's how we've tried building, really speaking, engaging with users. But what I want to say with the challenges, it's always trust and adoption. You know, can people trust this? And then the adoption rate of it. But one thing I do want to say with COVID, one thing that's helped with is with the adoption rate, because now we saw how, I think this was already mentioned earlier on, we saw that now, because we had one sort of way of sourcing food, now people are trying to find other alternatives. And that other alternatives came with technology. So now that sped up the adoption rate to be, maybe I would say we're a couple of years ahead, and we would have taken much longer. So some of the challenges are really around sort of trusting and adoption with any platform. I mean, I always make this example with Airbnb. A lot of us only got to know about Airbnb in 2014, 15. Airbnb has been around since 2008 during the recession. And that's because they had to rebuild, relaunch, redefine, and also having people to adopt to their business model. And so I think that's the biggest thing that you will have with any e-commerce space is people trusting and people adopting to it. And sometimes it's the language, people not understanding sort of the language in terms of not the actual literal language, but sort of the use of why do I actually need this as a user. So I think that's some of the main other things. And I think in South Africa, just to even add, it's warehousing, right? You know, the reason why Takealot takes 3 days is because they have warehouses across the country. So you won't wait 3 weeks. Imagine ordering an Uber and then it takes 2 weeks to get to you because, you know, there's probably not enough sort of supply. Or, you know, with Takealot, if it took you like 3 weeks to get something, it will, you know, you will deem that very irrelevant to you. You want something that is quick because you're ordering now, you're hoping that you'll go to get in the next couple of days. And so another thing is warehousing. And I think with us, what we've done is we're very strategic with our investor. We saw that let's find someone who has depots across the country. And that's why now when we do have orders, they take 3 to 4 days. And during agriculture, when you're trying to purchase something through the Inputs app, it can take you up to 2 weeks. So I think those are some of the things that, you know, warehousing, trust, adoption, those are some of the challenges when it comes to e-commerce spaces.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that, Ayanda. And Nicola, what do you find the benefits are of the existence of agri-e-commerce?
I think, well, certainly access is one of those things because it allows us to transcend perhaps physical boundaries that we would otherwise have. So there's, of course, absolutely still a time and a place and a space for people to go to their corner shop to purchase goods there. But we have greater access to different foodstuffs, things that we may not, you know, ordinarily be able to source in our communities via e-commerce. They are alternatives to things like supermarket chains, for example, We saw what happened with the social unrest in the country when many of the supermarket chains actually closed down because their supply chains and their warehousing were under threat. They were targets. That was then a time for others to shine, to give others a chance to start forging connections in the market. So I think e-commerce can be exceptionally powerful.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that, Nicola. And maybe Michelle, you could take this one. There's a question on the Q&A, and it's coming from Wanga, and he's asking that besides the initiatives that we have on the table, and that is from Footprint, Cooler, and Feed, do you think we have other segments where we should focus on in terms of area of improvement of agri-techs, or and especially taking into account how things are evolving?
Ooh, I feel like that's such a broad question. I would say anything in agriculture, if it hasn't been done yet, and there's definitely ways to improve it, then it's probably worth trying out. And I feel like especially in the African agricultural space is, as we mentioned, there's still more to be done because we still have so much potential to be able to lead in this space. I know it's not to answer your question, but yeah, there's a lot to be done.
All right, thank you for that. And drawing from that, Nicola, what do you think we should be excited about? What do you think we should be looking forward to in terms of development in this space?
Well, I am just so excited based on what I've seen from the prize entries. You know, we really are an amazing country. We're a very creative, resilient people in South Africa. And so, I mean, we've seen some of the most interesting ideas. For example, there's a young man in Limpopo who's identified that most families in rural areas have a fruit tree and the fruit goes rotten every year. And there's an opportunity for those people to be pulled into some kind of livelihood development via their fruit trees. So every time I think I've seen it all, you know, we come across something else that just it boggles the mind, really. So there are no limits on people's creativity. It's just about how do we make this feasible. And I particularly value and advocate for the approach of starting small. Let's test something locally. You know, does it work? Do people like it? Is it needed? And if so, fantastic. We've got something that either we can scale or we can replicate elsewhere. So there are lots of ideas flowing. And as Feed, you know, whose kind of core mandate is building an ecosystem around food, and you know, enabling greater transparency and collaboration and things of that sort, we find the space very, very exciting as far as tech goes, as far as women in agri go. It's a good time to be in this space.
Sounds very interesting to see what the entries may have looked like. But now, because we close for time, maybe we could just take a few parting words. Ayanda, you could go first, please.
Parting words, is it specific? What would you want me to part with?
In closing, what is it that you would want us to be cognizant of in terms of technology in the agricultural space and women's contribution thereof?
All right. So I think firstly, women's contribution, I think we've already touched on this earlier on. Obviously, I think for me, it's always when you look at the market size of agriculture, when you look at how Africa makes up so much arable land, and we need more women in making decisions. And we need to make sure that it's not an onus on us, but it's by opening those opportunities. Because if we're going to try compete the $1 trillion market in 2030, we need to push and make more women more prevalent in these roles, because the fact is women are the biggest group in agriculture, but they're not in the decision-making positions. They're mostly doing labor. But we need to change that, because how are we trying to compete with the 20-30 trillion, that market they have, or even just being part of this market, but we're not sort of promoting and pushing. As we grow, we need to make sure women are also progressing. We need to make sure that there's equal representation, and we're placing women in those, in positions where they're able to be part of those decision-making position, because we already make up such a huge component within this market. So I think that's the first thing, that we need more representation. Especially in these leadership roles, we need more representation and more. I think everyone has touched on this, because then that will really be reflective on how we can get to take part in this market share that's so immense in Africa. So I think that's the first part. And I think if anyone does have an idea or a solution they're trying to solve, make sure that solution is solving a problem that's prevalent in society. And I think it's important to collaborate with the right people. You don't always have to start from scratch. And I think that has already been mentioned, that it's so important to also see who's around you to collaborate with and enter those competitions. Go in, enter, build, and we need just more people being innovative. And also that being backed with, we need more partners. And if there are any partners on this call, we need more partners supporting these innovators. We need more partners funding these innovators. We need them to work with these entrepreneurs coming up with these ideas. So I think my thing is, in summary, is more women, more innovation, and more support for innovators or entrepreneurs.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ayanda. Michelle, your parting words?
Won't be as long, but I would say I think it would be good for governments to do what they can to get more women in this space and provide that extra support that will enable them to be present and start taking over in this space.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. And Nicola?
There's so much to say, but I think just in parting, for me and for Feed and for many others, representation has become very important, not at a tokenistic level, but really, how do you get people involved in something to contribute, their own knowledge and insights and experiences, but also to share in the spoils. And so I believe that, we need very deliberate, targeted interventions that bring groups such as women into these spaces, likewise youth and so forth. Because it's difficult to change tradition. Let's be honest, it is difficult. And yet we need to do it. We're in the 21st century. So I think spaces and instruments and opportunities that actively encourage the participation of previously underrepresented groups is critical for us to carve a way forward. And I really value, this space, the SeritiTALKS space, that's allowed women who are working in food, in and around food, to bring their voices and to share them with others. I had a quick look at the participants, and there seemed to be lots of women there. So that was really encouraging to see, and I'd love to see more of this. Thank you so much for having me on the panel today.
It's more than a pleasure, and thank you so much for making the time, Nicola, to come and make your contribution towards this important conversation. And the same applies to you, Michelle and Ayanda. Thank you so much for creating the time within your busy schedules to come through and have this important discussion with us. With that said, it is time for us to say goodbye. Thank you so much for everybody else that partook in the conversation. If you need more information with regards to this conversation that we've just had, please feel free to send an email to info@seriti.org.za. Alternatively, send it to refilwe@seriti.org.za. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Refilwe.
Bye.